Hey guys, it's Claire and welcome back to my channel. So I may have been a little bit obsessed with the Olympics over the last week, which is why I have not been doing any filming. And let's be honest, we can put it down to sheer laziness. Now, I just want to apologise if you hear any background noise. My parents are doing the washing up. I have been procrastinating all week about filming a video. And then I came home to do it today and I found out my camera was dead. Yay! And in order for me to film this video, edit it and upload it tonight, I need to film it now. Today I'm doing my January wrap-ups, and in January I had a pretty good reading month. I read 12 books. Part of this was because my parents went away to Houston, Texas for a week and I didn't have any distractions except for the dog. Other parts are because it was school holiday, so I didn't have to teach and I just got to relax and read. Let's not say the same for February now though, because I am struggling. I wanted to kick off the year with a reread that I knew I already loved, and I was hoping this would set my year off right, and it did. It is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. If you have not read this book, you need to. It is glorious, glorious! So I wanted to reread this as well because the movie is coming out. Love, Simon. It's coming out at the end of March. I was so lucky to already see this at the Penguin Teen Australia showcase night, where they showed this and spoke about so many other amazing books that were coming out. I also was very lucky to get a poster of Love, Simon, which is now hanging up on my wall over there. It goes without a doubt that I absolutely loved this book. Of course, it was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I love anything Becky Albertalli, and guys, at BEA in May, she is going to be there, so I'm pretty sure if I see her, I'm just going to squeal and cry forever. If you have not read Simon vs. the Homo Sapien Agenda by Becky Albertalli, you need to do it now. Now, please. The second book I read this month is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I first read Milk and Honey last year and I fell in love with it. I think I read it twice last year. And I was so lucky to meet Rupi in May when she came to Sydney for Sydney Writers Festival. Just listening to her talk was amazing. The Sun and Her Flowers was great, but I did not love it as much as Milk and Honey, which is why I only gave it 4 stars. But I still felt it was very beautiful, and like, she got so personal writing her own personal experiences down. It was a fantastic read and I would recommend it to anyone who loves any form of poetry or who just wants things that will kind of be very honest and raw. So I was lazy and did not get my books down before I filmed this video, so if you see the book behind me, just know I've been lazy and I did not get it down. Okay, so let me tell you a story about the next book, which is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. I pre-ordered this book when it was first announced, probably in like July, and I decided to pre-order a signed hardcover first edition version of the book off Amazon because John Green has always been one of my favourite authors and I've been waiting over 5 years for this book. I had my fingers crossed that I was going to love it. Early October the book arrives and half the pages were glued together. Thanks, Amazon. So I contacted them and they said there's nothing we can do, but we may get more stock in eventually. And, you know, I just had to wait. I waited a few weeks, I waited a month, then I emailed them back and they said they weren't going to get any, and I'm just like, you guys are joking me. I've been waiting for this book and I can't even read it because the pages are glued together. I did a ranty tweet on Twitter and eventually I received a copy of the book and it was signed and it's a first edition hardcover, and it only arrived at the end of December, so I was like, oh my god, I need to read this ASAP. And I finally picked it up at the beginning of the month and I loved it. It follows a girl called Aza, and her best friend wants to find out this mysterious disappearance of Aza's childhood friend's father, who she used to be really close with. So it follows her and it follows her getting close to this boy who she used to be really good friends with, and it was fantastic. So if you don't know, John Green struggled a lot with mental health and mental illness, and he still does to this day, and it's a very common feature in a lot of his books, and in Turtles All the Way Down it still is. It talks, just the way he writes about it and the way that he expresses what Aza is feeling and what she's thinking, just what she's going through, is so raw and emotional, and I felt myself connected to a lot of it, and it was just so beautiful and powerful, and I'm pretty sure I read it in one night because I could not put it down. So if you have not guessed already, I gave the book 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was The Vile Village by Lemony Snicket, which is book number 7 in the series of Unfortunate Events series. I can't call it a trilogy because there's way more than 3 books. So every year Netflix is now releasing a season on it, and well, I hope that's every year anyway. And I am just doing a reread of the series to remind myself why I love it, because it was one of my big childhood books, and I have like now dedicated myself to collecting all the editions. Honestly, one day I'll show you guys how many editions I have of the first book, and you will understand. I am obsessed. It's alright. It wasn't my favourite. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, they're easy reads. The writing does get a bit tedious because if you don't know, Lemony Snicket explains what every single word means. And it was good. It's probably mid-range of like, up here's my favourites, down here's my least favourites. It's probably about there. Yeah, that's all I gotta say because it's the next one in her series. After I read The Vile Village, I was in a bit of like a romance kick, so I decided to pick up a Colleen Hoover because my friend absolutely loves her, and I've slowly been making my way through her catalogue since I have so many books of hers. I have this habit of buying lots of books by one author and never reading them. So I'm trying to do that with Colleen Hoover. I'm currently reading one now as well. So I decided to pick up Confess by Colleen Hoover. Auburn has moved to Dallas more recently than earlier. And she's just looking for work on her way home from work one day. She goes past this art studio and meets a guy called Owen who runs this art studio about people who write in their own confessions and then they write art from it. And the story is about them coming together, learning secrets about each other, and just, there's so many twists and turns in this book. It is so good. But I do acknowledge that in a lot of Colleen Hoover's books, the guy is a lot of the time very abusive, or he just thinks he can get what he wants like that. So I read that in a couple of days. I gave it 4 stars. It would have been 5 stars if Owen he just has some abusive qualities and that I do not appreciate. I think the story could have been fantastic without it. They rubbed me a little bit the wrong way, so the book got 4 stars instead of 5, which I know is still a great rating, but I did try to explain why when I gave it a rating on Goodreads. The next book I read was God's Grave by J. Kristoff. Now, if you can't see behind me, because I'm not sure how my camera is positioned, but I have a lot of copies of God's Grave just up there. I think now it's at 6 copies, with a couple of more on the way. No. It is 4 copies. I need to get more J. Kristoff. Anyway, so this is the second book in the Nevernight Chronicles. If you don't know the Nevernight Chronicles, it follows Mia Corvair, a trained assassin, who wants to get revenge on the man who killed her father. And it's amazing. Like, this story is so action-packed. And I thought, since this is the second of the 3 books, I'd get so many answers. But to be honest, I left the book with like 20,000 more questions than I thought was possible. Without a doubt, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. And like, just J. Kristoff's writing is fantastic. And I also did read another book by him this month, which I will talk about in a minute. The next book I read in January was The Education of Margot Sanchez by Lilian Rivera. And this is about a girl who, because she's just spent so much of her father's money and did it without his permission, she has to work in his shop, like his grocery store, for all of summer break. So, like, I guess that's not that bad, but when you're a teenage girl, it's like the worst thing ever, which I completely understand. So this area of town is not the greatest, and then there's people out there selling their own things, and it's just about her family struggles, her trying to come to terms with working at the shop, and while trying to tell her friends that, oh no, I'm really just helping my dad out for the holidays, but I'll come see you at the end of the holidays. And yeah, so I found the main character very whingy. Like, she did not understand why she had to work in this shop to pay her dad every single cent of the money she spent. So she rubbed me the wrong way as well. I was just a bit annoyed by her. Like, but the story I thought was very important. I can see how it's important and other people love it, but just for me, I was just so annoyed by this main character. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I wish I could have given it more because I know so many people who have loved it. But for me, it just didn't. I just didn't love it. The next book I read was Fallen Into Place by Amy Zhang, which is about a girl who has a car crash and is in the hospital. She planned this car crash on purpose. The narrator of this story, you do not know who it is, and I listened to the audiobook of it and I absolutely adored it because just the way it was read, I think the way it was written as well, it was fantastic and it really kept me intrigued. So there were flashbacks to before the accident, there were flashbacks well, even before that, just telling you this girl's life and her friends and all of that. And yeah, it's she's not really that girl you thought would do something like this, because you think her life is perfect when in fact it actually isn't. And it goes through all the things that she's unhappy with and the people that are included in that. And then you also see the aftermath of how everyone actually is affected, and how some people may try to use this tragedy as an excuse to get out of schoolwork or out of work or to get more attention. And I just thought it was so beautiful and well done that I'm pretty sure I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. In January, I also read Words in Deep Blue by Kath Crowley, which is the Love Oz YA book set on the outer skirts of Melbourne. It follows a girl who moves to another town on the outskirts of Melbourne after she finishes school, just a couple of months after her brother passes away, because she wants to get away from the sea, because that's where he passed away, and she's returning to this town where she grew up. Her aunt, who gets her a job at the bookshop where her old best friend lived, but she never really got back into contact with her old best friend, so there's some bitterness there, and like both of them are very confused. And it's pretty much told set in a bookshop. Like, guys, any book that is set in a bookshop, I will read. I love it. It is fantastic. And just, I wish I was in a bookshop while I read that book. Anyway, so it's so good. It's so honest, and it shows this girl's grief is very strong, and you can kind of get that from the page, and it's really beautifully written, and it made me want to go to a bookshop. Right, so I mentioned J. Kristoff before, right? So one of my amazing friends let me borrow their copy of Lifelike by J. Kristoff, which is coming out in May, and I had 2-3 days to read it, and I somehow got it done. So Lifelike is amazing, let me tell you that already. It is a completely different world to Nevernight, completely different world to Illuminae. It involves robotics, it involves violence, it's amazing. It follows a girl named Eve at the start. She's getting her robot ready for this super big fight, which, like, it starts off straight away, and it is amazing. For me, I don't love it as much as Nevernight, because I don't think I could love anything as much as that series. It is still a 5-star read for me, but also just, the way Jay describes things is amazing. Like, I could actually vividly imagine it in my head, and I have problems imagining things in my head. It was just so amazing. Like, you guys, once this comes out in May, you need to read it. Thank you. Goodbye. Okay, there's only 2 more, I promise. The second last book I read was Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo. So when I picked this book up, I really kind of struggled with it. It was very slow for me. I know things were happening. I know there was a race and she found a girl and there was all this stuff going on, but I don't know, I just couldn't get into the world. So it took me pretty much all of the month to get my head into the game. To get my head into the book to try and figure out what was happening. So once I picked it up, I actually started to really enjoy it, which is very, very good. But before that, I wasn't inspired to read it. A lot of the book to me read as a big road trip between friends. So I was like, I know they weren't friends, I know they had a mission, but I couldn't get super into it, which is a real shame because I've loved other books I've read by Leigh Bardugo. I enjoyed it at bits, but I just found it very slow at other times, and some things lacked some explanation. So from memory, I gave that book a 3 out of 5 stars. The last book I read was This Is Where the World Ends by Amy Zhang, which is the second Amy Zhang book I've read this month. And this one, I'm gonna say now, I was not a huge fan of at all. So I did this book on audio, and it's about a boy and a girl who are best friends, but the girl does not want anyone to know that they are best friends. So at school they have to pretend they don't really know each other, which to me, I don't already like that trope, that whole storyline. So it starts off with the boy not remembering anything that's happened. The girl's disappeared. There was a massive bushfire or a bonfire at her house and everything went crazy. And I saw what happened, like what had actually happened. I could foresee it from the very start of the book, and I don't like that. So there's books like We Were Liars that I absolutely love because I have no idea what happens. And a book has to be really oblivious about what happens for me to know, for me to figure out, because I don't really look ahead. The book was told in both of their viewpoints, and the boy after the bonfire and the girl before the bonfire, and it showed their friendship and how rocky their friendship was and how manipulative it was. And I just wasn't a huge fan of that. I struggled to read the book. The audiobook was about 8 hours long and it took me quite a few weeks. And when it comes to audiobooks, I'm generally pretty quick if I'm into the book. Like, one I'm reading at the moment, I've read 7 hours in the last 2 days. So that book I gave 2 out of 5 stars, which is really low for me because I have to not like a book at all, or only 1 or 2 aspects to give it that low of a rating. So that was my January wrap up. My favourites probably would have been Words in Deep Blue by Kath Crowley and God's Grave by J. Christoph, and of course my reread of Simon's versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. Let's not forget Turtles All the Way Down. I could just start relisting all the books I just spoke to you about, because who would really enjoy that? Please let me know down below what your favourite read was in January. I would love to find out. And then I will be back. I promise I will be back, because I always say this, but I will be back very soon with a new video because I have my camera back, I have my lights back. I just need the motivation and the time, which I think I'm gonna get. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you later. Bye!